Hi, my name is Jason from Sly's Bonsai and Supplies. I wanted to talk about working with junipers. We actually have a multi-part juniper class or discussion on YouTube, but I just wanted to kind of do an update. This is the right time of year here in Central Florida to repot junipers, and I've been having a few customers tell me, hey, when are you going to do more YouTube videos? I watch them, and people actually watch this? So I decided to just do a couple quick ones to kind of show you what we're doing at the nursery right now. This is a Sea Green Juniper. I love these. They have nice adult foliage. They tend to maintain their adult foliage throughout their life. This is a 2-year-old cutting that's great for either being used as a whip for a project, or even growing on to start creating a nice bonsai out of. What I'm going to do with it is actually wire it up for movement and put it in a bonsai pot just for aesthetics, just to give it a little bit more interest. That said, you certainly don't have to put this in a bonsai pot. You could wire this up and just put it in a larger pot, like this 8-inch per Cummins Nana, and let it grow for a few years just to thicken the trunk. This is a great way to get you plenty of root growth, and this tree is now at about 1 inch thick just because we've let it grow long and thicken up. Once you put them in a bonsai pot, it kind of slows down the development. However, if your tree's got a lot of interest and a lot of movement and it's really pretty, so what? If you don't have a big trunk, so what? You have something that's attractive, that looks good on your bench, and it's something you can enjoy. You don't have to grow it for 4, 5, 6 years to have a trunk. You can put this one on your bench and you can enjoy it, and you can have 5 or 6 other ones that you're growing to thicken up. So today I'm just going to show you one of the ways that you can enjoy your inexpensive bonsai material. This tree right here is, I think, $7.50 at our shop, the way it sets. So it's great, inexpensive material that you can pick up and enjoy. So I'm going to get started. One thing I want to mention, now that we're after Christmas, this is the perfect time to take cuttings. If you find something that has a vigorous tip but not super vigorous, not like the very apex, and you have it just starting to become woody, you can actually take this, cut it at an angle, put it in rooting hormone, put it in pine bark and perlite, and just water it in a shady spot. And a lot of these by April or May will have developed roots, and in 2 years you can get something like this once they get growing and you start fertilizing them well. It's a great way to continually propagate your material. So what I'm going to do is just going to eliminate a lot of the branches that I know I don't want, stuff that's weak, stuff that we would call like fuzz. That's really, if you have like 2 or 3 future branches all coming from the same location, I eliminate that. If they're just at a crotch of a branch, if they're super small, if they're weak, I eliminate them. I don't take the strong branches off, especially if I want something there. Junipers get their strength from their foliage, so you always want to leave strong, vigorous foliage if you want the trunk to thicken and develop. If you come back here and you treat them like a ficus and you cut all the strong growing stuff off, you'll end up with a very weak tree. But if you leave all the stronger sections, that's where it'll grow. That's where it'll get a lot of its new growth from. If you want to redirect the strength of a juniper, you can take the really strong tips and you can cut them back to a strong lateral. That'll weaken that shoot and redirect it back into the tree. Matter of fact, that's how we get junipers to backbud. We'll let them get really full and get real long, vigorous tips, and then we come in there and we cut them pretty hard cutting those vigorous tips to strong laterals and open them up so the sunlight gets in there and get back budding. Junipers do back bud pretty well. Just as a multi-year process. You don't cut them down to a stump and expect them to pop. Junipers don't reliably pop on bare wood. You always have to have green foliage. So I've taken maybe 10%, maybe 15% of the foliage off. Not much. You can take pretty comfortably up to 30% without having the tree kind of slow down and get shocked. This tree is going to be a double trunk. I know this is going into a bonsai pot after this, so I'm not going to go too deep, because if I go all the way down to the bottom of the pot, I'm just going to have to cut it off later anyway. Hold the wire with one hand and manipulate the wire with the other. Alright, second trunk is wired. Now I'm going to start doing some movement on this. When I bend the wire, I always like to have the wire on the outside of a bend. And the reason why is your wood fibers are growing along the tree. If you try to bend where there's no wire, there's nothing to brace those wood fibers and they tend to crack. You still might get cracks if you're bending a tree. This is very young, but there's always a possibility. With the wire over the cracks, tends to keep it keeps it set. So that it kind of braces that so they don't actually split and damage the cambium and potentially kill the tree, or at least damage the tree. I try to have as much movement as I can, because as the tree continues to grow, that movement will actually become more subtle as it thickens. Also, some of the wiring might look redundant at this point, but remember, you might come in here and shorten this tree quite a bit. You might shorten it all the way down to a mame size or a shohin size. Meanwhile, all that stuff you've wired up here, you could air layer and make into more trees. So this one little tree over time could become multiple trees, and each one will already have movement in the trunk line because you've already wired it. It's a multi-year process, but that's bonsai. Bonsai trees are decades long investments, so it's something to think about for the future. Again, when I bend the wires on the outside, you heard the pot, not the tree. The tree didn't crack. So when you do the first, kind of see the first bend of what I've done, just the trunk line, I try to make the second trunk echo that first trunk, because whatever happened to this tree in nature that you're trying to represent would have affected both trunks the same. So ideally, when we have a double trunk or multiple trunks, they echo each other's flow, they echo each other's movement. So I'm just trying to achieve that with a second. And it is a little bit thinner and a little shorter, so this would become like the sun. This is a father-son twin trunk. So maybe mother-daughter, because it's very feminine, right? Very thin, not very wispy. So let me work on this next. Now obviously I have a lot more branches on this than I need. However, the more branches I have on this, the faster these two trunks are going to thicken. Also, it gives me options. If I did take off, when you saw me in the beginning, I took off any barbells. There were two branches coming from the same height. on the tree, I eliminated one. So there's not any barbells. Even if some of them are close, one of them is a little lower than the other one. Specifically, so we have branches all up and down these two trunks. So as this continues to grow, I might, once these little twigs start to brown out and lignify or turn woody, I might wire these a little bit more down the road. I may eliminate some real low branches, but right now these low branches are going to help thicken everything below it. So this will also, these little low branches here will help thicken the trunk. So it's always better with the juniper. Again, they get their strength from their foliage. It's always better with the juniper to leave more foliage on than you think. A classic beginner mistake is that somebody takes a tree, they buy it from a box store, or they buy it from a regular nursery, and they take it home, and the first thing they do is they take this huge tree, this huge overgrown juniper, and they cut it down to the very first shoot, or first couple shoots, and they go, oh yeah, I'm going to regrow it, make it into a bonsai. You've extremely weakened the tree when you did that. And then when you tried to repot it, well, I can't have it in this 3-gallon pot, I can't have it in this plastic pot. You take it out of that pot and you put it into a bonsai pot. Now you've cut 80% of the roots off or more, and you've extremely weakened the tree. It probably wasn't even bonsai soil, so all the roots are on the outside edge, and it's overgrown because it's old, so that there's nothing inside. And then you take it and you cut it, and you cut most of the roots off, and a lot of times it's the death sentence. So it's better to treat junipers with a little bit more kid gloves. Leave more foliage than you think, and when you repot it, don't bare root it. You see, this has got a real healthy root system. It's in pine bark perlite, about 50-50, so it's very well drained. Also, I've seen people grow bonsai junipers in sand, right in bonsai soil. They don't even bother with any training soil. All of that is fine. There's nothing wrong with putting them in well-drained, any sort of well-drained mix. But ultimately, once you put them in a bonsai pot, they need to be put in bonsai soil. This guy right now is going to be just put in a cute little unglazed. It's going to slow down his development a little bit, but he's going to be a lot more attractive. Also, it's going to kind of give him a little bit better of a front. I'll show you in just a sec. I am cutting a little bit of the root back underneath. Just a little bit. I'm only taking about maybe 20% of the roots off, and I'm not bare rooting it. I'm not taking every scrap of soil off, because if you bare root a juniper, it greatly weakens the tree. Here in Florida, we typically repot from after Christmas till about April 1st. That's a good rule of thumb. Don't bare root, even though I'm going to put it in bonsai soil. We'll do it in stages. I kind of took out the bottom. I've positioned the roots radially, eliminated anything that's crossing. I use akadama, hyuga pumice, black lava, and red lava. That's what I just put a little pile in. I'm angling it. I'm going to tie it into the pot, and then I'm going to chopstick the rest of the bonsai soil. Once this is in the pot, I'll water this till it comes out clear. You can put a little bit of shredded sphagnum on the surface, especially if you're really worried about it desiccating, but because we're just about in January, it's nice and cool out. But you can kind of see the lines on this tree, and this is kind of putting the cart before the horse, to have this super tall, thin little goofy thing in a little tiny pot like this. Aesthetically, it's actually a little bit small for this, but this tree might be much shorter, or I might even take most all the branches off on the bottom 80% and make it a tight little twin trunk literati style, which that'll actually work pretty well with that movement in the trunk. In a couple years, I think it'll be great. So you don't have to have an expensive piece of material to start with. You can start with $7.50 and a $12 bonsai pot with $4 or $5 worth of bonsai soil. It's cute. It looks decent on your bench. You have slowed down the trunk significantly by putting it right in a bonsai pot, but it doesn't have to have a huge trunk to be charming. You can have a beautiful little interesting thing on your bench. I will say, once this guy gets established in this pot, in this small little 6-inch pot, 6 inches, you're going to want to repot it probably every January, February, March, because it's such a tiny pot. If you had put this in a trainer pot, plastic trainer, which also wouldn't be horrible, it'd still look good on your bench, it would give you about double the root growth for this tree. And really that would be more aesthetically, it'd still look aesthetically pleasing on your bench, but horticulturally it would be more beneficial for this tree to continue to grow, because even though it wouldn't be as fast as in a 10-inch pot or a 3-gallon pot, it will look good on your bench. And this is a plastic pot that's only $6 retail, so you know, you could either buy a $12 Chinese bonsai pot or a $6 plastic pot that's got twice the soil space. It's really, you know, what do you want to do with the tree? How do you want to develop it? That's the beauty of this hobby, is it's what do you want to do? What is your personal preference? Me, I always grow them in a bigger trunk or a bigger pot, sometimes for years, because I want a bigger trunk. Proportionally, I'm looking for that 6-to-1 ratio. This guy, I'm going to do in a later video, I'll probably cut him down to 8 to 10 inches tall, get rid of a lot of this excessive stuff that's literally was only there to thicken it up and to give it interest, and start its life as for bonsai. But that's 5 years longer, 6 years longer than this little guy. You know, this is an immediate, I have something in a pot and it looks decent on my bench kind of thing. And you can have all stages, because bonsai's not in the finished product. Bonsai is the doing. It's the appreciating. It's having stuff that you can appreciate when you go out there and look and contemplate and imagine yourself underneath the boughs of that tree, and you know, it transports you mentally into that mind space. So there you go. Thank you.